EU condemns the Chinese regime for supporting Russia in Ukraine war. Italian police crack down on Chinese underground banks. U.S. measures are pushing back China's ambitions in its chip industry development. Beijing to intensify corruption crackdown on top bankers. UK security in danger, Chinese spies found to have infiltrated MPs' interest groups.
The foreign policy chief of the European Union, Josep Borrell, condemned the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, for its support of Russia amid the invasion of Ukraine, as he called the CCP's position a blatant violation of the United Nations commitments. Josep Borrell said, "There cannot be siding with the aggressor. There is a clear expectation from a permanent member of the UN Security Council to stand up in defense of international rules-based order, and China has a moral duty to contribute to a fair peace." Josep Borrell's comment came before a trip to Beijing by the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and French President Emmanuel Macron. The bloc's foreign policy chief also commented that Xi's Moscow meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin last month and their action suggested they are close partners. They agreed on the need to not deploy nuclear arms abroad. Some days later, Russia deployed tactical weapons, nuclear tactical weapons, in Belarus. This comes, ironically, after Chinese President Xi visited Moscow and mentioned the need for peace. Last month, on the sidelines of Xi Jinping's visit to Putin in Moscow, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that China intended to provide a diplomatic shield for Russia. Since the war, Russia has been at a disadvantage and has moved closer to China for its support on both economic and diplomatic fronts. Blinken said that Xi's visit came just after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for the Russian president. China felt no responsibility to stand against Russian atrocities committed in the war against Ukraine. Blinken noted that instead of condemning Russia, the CCP offered diplomatic support as a cover for it to continue committing human rights crimes.
Italian police have recently uncovered a network of Chinese underground money changers in Rome, Florence, Padua, Prato, and Naples. Voice of America reported on April 5th that these underground money changers are allegedly involved in money laundering, with tens of billions of euros flowing to China through this channel. The Italian Anti-Mafia Commission has launched an investigation into these underground money changers. Italian financial police have informed Europol of the case. At the same time, they recently launched a series of operations against underground money laundering, tax evasion, illegal employment, drug trafficking, and organized prostitution. Local Chinese-language media in Italy also reported a series of law enforcement actions the Italian authorities took to crack down on Chinese underworld organizations. Italian authorities have noticed a significant drop in remittances from Italy to China through the banking systems for several years. In 2017, there were 5 billion euros remitted from Italy to China, and by 2021, it fell to only 9 million. Italian media reports pointed out that the COVID pandemic cannot explain such a drop, implying massive cash flows outside the banking supervision system. Since March, Italy has seen frequent press coverage of uncovering underground money banks. For example, Milan's Corriere della Sera reported that by using telephone tapping, the Italian financial police had seized a significant money laundering and tax evasion organization, which had been operating for nearly 20 years. The investigation found that the organization had issued false invoices and transferred 270 million euros to China through fictitious trade. As a result, the prosecution has approved the arrest of 10 people, with 12 others grounded at home. The prosecution also approved the preventative seizure of 290 million euros in a money laundering network that included Chinese and an Italian with close ties to the Italian fiscal police, who used his economic expertise to help the organization evade taxes. Another report said a Florentine money laundering and tax evasion organization used cryptocurrency to transfer property to China. 30 Chinese entrepreneurs are under investigation. The financial analysis found that the organization involved many companies in the wholesale trade of clothing and shoes. In addition, investigators deduced that 4 members of the money laundering organization transferred 10 million euros to China through a series of complex operations. Lorenzo Zanni, a professor at the Department of Business and Legal Studies at the University of Siena in Italy, said that Chinese immigrants have contributed to the Italian economy. Cooperation between the two sides would create more opportunities, and the illegal behavior of some Chinese is damaging the image of law-abiding Chinese. The actions of the U.S. to prevent the Chinese Communist Party from developing the chip industry are showing results. Beijing seems increasingly challenged to retaliate against the U.S. and find the direction for its chip development strategy. According to AP, the CCP recognizes the importance of chips in all areas, from phones to kitchen appliances to fighter jets, so the chip is an indispensable means to help Beijing compete with Washington, as well as help it exert influence on a global scale. However, since the Trump era, the U.S. has taken measures to limit the development of the CCP's chip industry by denying Chinese chip companies access to advanced chip technologies. Last October, the CCP became even more breathless as the Biden administration expanded Trump's controls on Chinese chipmakers' access to advanced chip technology. Japan and the Netherlands have also responded, aligning themselves with the U.S. by adopting measures to restrict China's access to chip technology they might use to make weapons. Handel Jones, a tech industry consultant, said that the Chinese industries will hit a wall in 2025 or 2026 if they cannot access next-generation chips or the tools they need to make their own. Jones, CEO of International Business Strategies, commented that China will start falling behind significantly in chip manufacturing compared to the world. Currently, China's chip manufacturing technology is far behind the world. For example, the country's chip makers can only etch circuits as small as 28 nanometers apart. Meanwhile, TSMC of Taiwan and many other companies worldwide can etch circuits just 3 nanometers apart. Peter Hanbury, who follows the industry for Bain & Company, said that to produce the latest chips, you need EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography tools, a very complicated process recipe, and not just a couple of $1 billion, but tens and tens of billions of dollars. Hanbury added, Chinese chip companies, are not going to be able to produce competitive server, PC, and smartphone chips. Huawei announced on its website last December that it was working on EUV technology. According to experts, creating an EUV comparable to Dutch's ASML will cost about $5 billion and require a decade of research. So, Hanbury argues that China is very far away from getting its own EUV.
The Chinese government has told the financial sector to brace for further corruption clampdown as the ex-chairman of the Bank of China has become the latest target. Bloomberg reported that the dire warning was issued at a private meeting with top bank executives on March 31st when Beijing said it was investigating former Bank of China chairman Liu Lianggu for corruption. The meeting was attended by officials from the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission and the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. Sources who wished to remain anonymous said the two Chinese regulators warned the corruption crackdown would only intensify. They noted that Liu's case should be picked up as a cautionary example. Accordingly, bankers, especially top managers, were told to obey the laws and regulations and improve self-discipline. Bloomberg said the warning means Chinese President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption overhaul is only picking up pace. The publication pointed out that the Chinese government has ensnared at least 20 top leaders in the financial sectors since late February. Most notable could be the case of kingmaker Bao Fan, CEO of China Renaissance. He is reportedly assisting in an investigation conducted by Chinese authorities after going missing around February 17th. His dealmaker firm suspended trading on April 3rd because of his continuous absence. Beijing slammed its clampdown threats on the $60 trillion sector at the same time as officials are trying to reinsure domestic and overseas firms about the economy's grand return.
The chairman of the UK Parliamentary Standards Committee, Chris Bryant, said that foreign governments are extremely keen on utilizing all-party parliamentary groups, AAPGs, to influence the UK government. Moreover, the number of these informal interest groups has spiraled recently. The UK Daily Express reported that Bryant, the Labour Member of Parliament, warned that spies from nations like China had penetrated all-party parliamentary groups. He brought up a well-known instance in which the UK Security Service, or MI5, exposed a woman who assisted in setting up a Chinese group in Britain as spies. He claimed there had been numerous cases that were an issue for the security services. Bryant said that Alison Giles, the head of security at the UK House of Commons, provided convincing proof that some foreign countries are keen on using APPGs to express their viewpoint. Sometimes that's entirely lawful and fine. Even from problematic nations, it is acceptable for MPs to meet with ambassadors. Yet, occasionally, there is an incident concerning China, but it is not the only example where there are security concerns. The committee has proposed several reforms, one of which is to forbid foreign governments from leading APPGs. It is recommended prohibiting interest groups from accepting funding from foreign governments. The Standards Committee recommended that all APPGs be prohibited from collecting funding from foreign governments and be required to disclose their annual revenue and expenses. He said, "The whole of our system of lobbying has soft underbelly, and it's called APPGs." He added, "Anyone can set them up. They're running in 5 minutes, and you hardly have to have anyone interested or turn up, yet then you can tout your influence around Parliament very easily." Giles previously suggested that APPGs were relatively unregulated and crucially dependent on outside interests for funding.